Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a cloud solutions architect focused on management technologies. Today's discussion is part 4 of a series focusing on caching options available with ConfigMgr Current Branch. Actually, this session will be really not focused on ConfigMgr at all, but it's part of a caching series that I started with ConfigMgr, or it kind of is in the same vein as a caching series that I started with ConfigMgr. So I will continue it under the ConfigMgr umbrella, even though we're going to focus outside of ConfigMgr. Certainly, we'll mention some things about ConfigMgr as part of this, but it's a topic that is well beyond just ConfigMgr. So the topic today, delivery optimization. So this is actually a piece that I've wanted to talk about for a while now, and there's a large gap between part 3 of this series and what I'm doing now. Kind of on purpose, right? Because delivery optimization, when it was first introduced, frankly, I didn't understand it totally, and I had some other priorities, so I kind of fell through the cracks. And now, because of some different needs, it's resurfaced. And glad that I'm back to it because it has clarified a lot in my mind as to what this is, how it works, and so forth. And also, we've added some things to delivery optimization to I think make it even more of a relevant thing. So let's dive in to delivery optimization and see what it's all about. Right. So here's our agenda that we follow for sessions. Like this, we'll talk through what it is, why we care, then we'll do some different reviews and finally get into seeing it configured and working. Okay. So what is this thing that we call delivery optimization? Well, certainly it's focused on, or historically has been, focused on Windows 10 and 11, right? So on Windows 10, you'll have delivery optimization enabled by default. So will you on Windows 11. But it's not just Windows 10 and 11 anymore. We do have limited support on Windows Server. You'll see the details of that coming up. We also have limited support in preview right now for Linux on IoT devices. And again, you'll see another reference to that coming up, right? I know that there's some additional, this is an interesting area, delivery optimization is, because things are actively still being developed. And, I've heard some rumblings about some other things that will show up in the future. So definitely stay tuned to this area. So again, what is it about? It's certainly about content management. Whenever you say content management, at least to me, I think about peer-to-peer kind of acquisition of content and so forth to help with network bandwidth. Certainly, delivery optimization is for that, but it's not just for that, right? Because of the unique way that delivery optimization works, content security is at the very heart of how this works. This is something that I didn't totally understand, right? I asked the question, I'll ask it here, the question that I had in my mind, I'll answer it later, right? Unless I get too impatient and answer it now. But I asked the question, we have a limited amount of content that we can support through delivery optimization, especially initially when delivery optimization was introduced. That list has expanded, and there's a lot of stuff there now. But what I've always wondered is, why is it that delivery optimization is limited to only certain content types? Why can't it be basically any content type like other caching solutions bring to the table? Well, I'll answer that for you later. And the answer is really compelling in terms of security, right? The good news here is that huge amounts of what you would be deploying to your environment anyway these days is covered by delivery optimization. The good news also is where there's not coverage with delivery optimization, and you have another solution, like you'll see examples of that with ConfigMgr, talk about them more later, right? You can work side by side with another caching solution and delivery optimization to be able to completely cover the needs that you have, right? So certainly content peering is a part of it, right? A peer-to-peer distribution technology that will help you preserve bandwidth for those content types that are supported, like software updates, which are huge, right? And others. So we'll talk about that more. Manage content retrieval. So it's not just a peering technology, but we manage how and where the content is retrieved. So you can read in our docs that delivery optimization is a cloud service. It is. It's driven from from the cloud. And what does that exactly mean? Why is it a cloud service? Why is it cool that it is a cloud service? Because okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and go. I knew I would do this. Go ahead and tell you kind of the answer to the question I asked because it's kind of important, right? The reason that delivery optimization is only able to support certain software types in its operation is because in order for delivery optimization to service a content type, that content has to be loaded into the delivery optimization service, right? So think of it this way. When we, take two examples, two of several, right? So we have delivery optimization supports working with apps that are installed from the Microsoft Store. Delivery optimization works with deploying software updates, right? And so both of those are content pieces that when you have a new content piece published, you have to also make delivery optimization aware of that content. Doesn't mean that you're publishing the content necessarily to delivery optimization, but just that delivery optimization knows about that content, knows that it should service that content, knows where to get that content so it can point clients that are asking for it to be able to download it there, right? Probably an oversimplification, but that's why, right? Only the content that delivery optimization knows about can it support. And so that's why we have limited, and it's not really that limited, but we have a defined list of the content types that delivery optimization can support. That allows us to ensure that the content that you're getting is the right content that you're asking for. It's not being spoofed in some way. Again, a big asterisk around there. We'll talk about the different modes of operation of delivery optimization soon, but wanted to add that, right? And so having it be cloud managed, back to what I was saying, managed content retrieval, whenever your clients go up to delivery optimization and ask for a given piece of content, right, they'll either be told, hey, great, I know what it is, and so here's where you go download it because no one so far has asked for it. You're the first one. And so that client will go download the whole thing from the Microsoft CDN perhaps, right, or other locations. You'll see that coming up, right? And then when the second client comes up, then assuming that content type is supported for peer-to-peer distribution, again, asterisk there, more on that in a minute, then the cloud delivery optimization cloud service might tell the second client, oh, by the way, you can go get this range of bits for this content from your peer on the network who just started downloading it. But since it's just started downloading, you need to get the other range of bits from the web. And so partial download will come from a peer, partial download will come from the cloud, right? And there's variances in how you can even do that, right? So, but that's all handled by the delivery optimization service, which is a cloud service, and it's really cool to be able to orchestrate how all of this works, right? And then finally, Microsoft Store. I shared with you that Microsoft Store apps are a way or are supported for use with delivery optimization. However you get them. If you go to the store directly and you choose to download an app and we can leverage delivery optimization, we will. If you're deploying through Intune or whatever else, then we can do things there as well. ConfigMgr, no, because only certain content types are supported from ConfigMgr. This will come clear in a minute, right? The content that you're going to deploy has to be known and published by a provider so that delivery optimization knows that it can get it. And there's some details behind the scenes in that, which means certain things can be done with Intune, certain things can be done with ConfigMgr, certain things can be done regardless, right? Anyway, more on that in a little bit. In terms of the Microsoft Store, though, delivery optimization is totally, completely compatible with the new Microsoft Store that's coming out soon. As of this recording, it hasn't yet released. As of this recording, we just really talked about it at Microsoft Ignite, and so it's coming soon, and we will fully support that store whenever it arrives with delivery optimization. right? Talked about the reasons that cloud managed is a really cool thing, and then already talked about some of the things about peering and beyond. So definitely a peering solution, definitely more than a peering solution, right? So why delivery optimization? Well, one reason, a key reason that people want delivery optimization, at least initially, is caching, right? Being able to have content cached on peers in your network to preserve bandwidth, right? Um, cloud managed, again, talked about the reasons for cloud managed being a really useful thing, right? Now, a little bit more about cloud managed. So I'll go ahead and jump forward on this too. You'll see it on a slide coming up. I mentioned the modes of operation for delivery optimization. And there are a couple of ways you could take that. Let me explain them a couple of different ways, right? The first is the way that you're able to obtain the content. For most of the content types, all three of the mechanisms are supported. The HTTP method, which simply means you're going to go directly to the web and download the content, which would raise the question, well, if I'm going to go to the web to directly download the content, why do I need delivery optimization? And that's a good question. And the answer is for some of the content security that delivery optimization provides, also because of some of the controls that delivery optimization provides in terms of download rate, in terms of times of day that you can download, and so on, that would work even in those scenarios, right? The other way that you obtain the content would be through peer-to-peer. And we understand, hopefully, what that is, right? And then the third way is through something we may do a session on. I don't know. We'll see. But it is related to delivery optimization. So not going to talk about it greatly here, but probably I'll convince myself to do a session on it as we go forward, called Microsoft Connected Cache. Now you see in ConfigMgr that there is a component called Microsoft Connected Cache. Well, there's more to talk about than just that. And so, we'll save that for another session. But it's one of those three ways that you can go and obtain your content. So that's one way to think about the mode of operation. Another way to think about the mode of operation is through something called download mode. Now, I'm going to mention that here. I'm going to mention it again later because it is so important. So download mode describes how delivery optimization works. And there's several modes of operation, but really that describes how do you treat your clients and kind of group them together. There's the most common are options 1, 2, and 3. Options 1 and 2 are really the ones that I've most used, right? Option 1 would be if all of your clients are behind a single NAT, network address translation device, and they all share the same internet connection, then download mode 1 might be what you want, right? To let all of those devices behind that same NAT participate as a peer, right? And then download option 2 is going to use something called a group ID, where you can decide what devices are in that group and participate together. You'll see that again coming up. But one thing I'll just inject here in conversations, when we think about caching solutions that are out there today, like the ones with ConfigMgr for peer cache, for branch cache, for some of the third-party solutions like One Nomad or Adaptiva, many of them use subnets in order to identify devices that you want to peer from, right? Sometimes organizations have configurations where subnets really aren't the most appropriate way to do this kind of peering, right? For whatever reason. Maybe you want beyond the subnet. Maybe your subnet is really a supernet, and so there's more clients there than you really want, et cetera. Again, minutiae within that. But because of delivery optimization's config and not using subnets, and instead using things like NAT or a manually imposed group ID, which ConfigMgr can apply to you. Anyway, more on that in a minute, right? Then it's really an interesting solution that gives you options you might not have otherwise. So enough about that. I went way down the rabbit hole on that. Apologize for that, but want to make sure I get things explained as thoroughly as possible. You'll see some of this again, right? Content. So we talked about the content already and how important it is. And we'll see the content types that we can support in another slide coming up. So bandwidth, right? Again, the reason people think about delivery optimization typically is for the bandwidth savings that is provided whenever you do those peer-to-peer downloads. Very, very flexible, right? So we can work with just in terms of updates. We can do Windows Update, Windows Server Update Services, Windows Update for Business, AutoPatch can use it. Sorry, let me say that a different way. There's a number of ways that you can take advantage of delivery optimization, regardless of how the content might be delivered, right? So for Windows Update, if you get your patches through ConfigMgr, or through Windows Update for Business, or Intune, or if you get your software updates through Windows Auto Patch, or endpoint manager, or update rings, or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can use delivery optimization with all of that, right? And then certainly there are some content types that only work with Intune or other things. Again, more in the minutia there, but we'll get to some of that in a minute. And we talked about the data safety and the privacy that you can get with delivery optimization. Now, I put an asterisk there when I mentioned it, because that is not something you have to use. You can bypass that if you want to on certain devices, right? Not sure a good argument to bypass it, but you could bypass it if you needed to on devices. We'll talk about how that's done again shortly. Okay, so in terms of requirements, the requirements for delivery optimization, pretty darn easy, right? You certainly need to have access to the delivery optimization endpoints, meaning access through the firewall or whatever else, in order to use delivery optimization. And there's a number of URLs that you need to have access to. Instead of listing those here, I just give you a URL that will point you to what those endpoints are. You need a supported operating system, of course, Windows 10 and 11, Windows Server, Linux, right? Pay attention to that space, maybe more to come there. And just to note that if you do have a proxy, then yeah, you can work with a proxy. Now, there's some recommendations about the proxy, how to be most efficient. I put up there when HTTP access type automatic proxy. There's some details about that in the URL below that. So if you want to use it with a proxy, at least be aware of some of the configuration issues and so on. But besides that, Windows 10 and 11, delivery optimization is enabled by default, right? I know a lot of folks have turned off delivery optimization in Windows 10 and 11, partially probably because they weren't ready to implement it, maybe didn't know about it, maybe had a third-party caching solution, wanted to make sure there wasn't a conflict, etc. And that's not a bad thing, right? Because one of my customers has a third-party product, One Nomad, and at the time that delivery optimization was released, there was an incompatibility with One Nomad and delivery optimization. That was a long time ago. As of now, and again, as of a long time ago, One Nomad had introduced a patch to allow it to work side by side with delivery optimization, so that incompatibility is gone. But it could be disabled in your environment. But by default, it's turned on. By default, it's turned off on Windows Server. Now, here's another factoid that I'll mention again probably later. When you have delivery optimization enabled for your workstations and for your servers, then workstations will only talk to workstations and servers will only talk to servers for delivery optimization. That's explicitly in place, but because the content types that you would have might be different between servers and workstations, and security. Probably folks would prefer that workstations not talk to servers, maybe in certain ways that is not as open or controlled or whatever. I mean, but again, whatever reason, that's the way it's set up by default. Okay, so the components of delivery optimization, a few, right? There's the delivery optimization cloud service. That is the heart and soul of delivery optimization, where your devices will communicate, get instructions from, etc. Right? But then to make delivery optimization happen, the content that you care about has to be published to the delivery optimization service so it knows about that content. Again, doesn't mean that that the delivery optimization service is going to store all of the content. Frankly, that's my belief. I haven't seen the back end of the delivery optimization service, but my understanding of it is that's the way it works, right? You would upload your content so that the delivery optimization service basically has some metadata about your content, and then that content may be stored in a different location. Maybe it's on the Microsoft Update, for example, or maybe it's on a Microsoft CDN that we can point to, or maybe it's on a peer, or maybe it's on a Microsoft Connected Cache server somewhere, right? Or maybe it's in all those locations that you can pick and choose from, or the cloud service can pick and choose from, right? So this is my attempt to describe how delivery optimization works, right? So here we have Microsoft content, or it could be at some point third parties can publish content. So I mentioned before that in order for the delivery optimization service to work with a content type, that content type has to be known by delivery optimization. It has to be published to delivery optimization, right? Delivery optimization has to be engineered to accept that content type. So a provider will need to publish that content up. The provider right now is Microsoft, right? So that's why whenever you look down the list of content available, you're going to see all of it is from Microsoft. Now there's going to be an asterisk there, right? Because there's certain content that you're going to be able to deploy that is third-party content, like, for example, with Win32 apps and Intune. Certainly not every app that you would deploy through Intune is going to be Microsoft content as a Win32 app, right? There are store apps that you might deploy that are not Microsoft-generated content, but here's the point. The service that's publishing that content to delivery optimization is a Microsoft service. So in the case of the store apps, that's going to be the store publishing the content over to delivery optimization. In the case of Intune, that's going to be Intune publishing the Win32 app data up to delivery optimization, right? So we have to make the delivery optimization service aware of the content. Now, there could be in the future, don't know, opportunities for third parties to directly publish their content up in the delivery optimization service. So that's step one. Step two is you might have some delivery optimization clients that are requesting the content. So maybe the first client requests it, the delivery optimization service sees the content that's being requested, looks at what it knows about the peers for this particular device, finds out, oh, there's no one that has this, and so it might direct it, go over here to the Microsoft CDN and pull that down. Or, depending on if you're in the same network location, whatever, go over to Microsoft Connected Cache, pull that down. Peers, there is no peer with the content, so there's no option outside of those two, and so this client would start to download it. Well, it may be a little bit later, this client asks for it. And so now the delivery optimization service says, oh, I know what that is. I just saw a client ask for that. I directed them over here maybe. But now I know that this client is in progress of downloading, so you can go get the first part of that range locally from this client. And then for the rest of it, go over to the Microsoft CDN and get it, right? Or go over to your connected cache and get it. And that's kind of how it works. And the delivery optimization service is the glue, is the brain, if you will, that holds that all together. Now, here's the different content types that we can support, and we'll look at Windows client, right? So and I'm not going to go through this. I put it up here in detail so you can look at it. But the things that are important here, what is the mode that we can use to retrieve a particular content type, right? Here's the three listed, right? So HTTP download, we already talked about that. That's a direct download from the internet. The reason that's important with delivery optimization is for security and controls you can put on top of it. Peer-to-peer, that's for the network savings. Microsoft Connected Cache, that essentially is a local server on your network that when your devices are on your local network, they can take advantage of that locally versus having to go out to the internet to get the content, right? Again, maybe we'll do a separate session on Microsoft Connected Cache, haven't decided yet. You'll see that all of the content pieces on this first slide are all supported for all three. And so that includes Windows Update, that's feature updates, quality updates, language pack, drivers, Windows Store files, Windows Store for business files, Defender and definition updates, Intune Win32 apps, Microsoft 365 apps, Edge browsers updates, right? So a good chunk of content right there, but we can keep going. So here we have config. Now this one's a little bit confusing. At first, whenever delivery optimization was first introduced, we only supported ConfigMgr Express updates. Then later, we decided we would support all update types from ConfigMgr. Now, updates are the only type of content that is supported with delivery optimization when used with ConfigMgr. So if you have task sequences or packages or applications or whatever else that you are deploying with ConfigMgr and you want to take advantage of caching for those, then you will need an additional cache solution like ConfigMgr Pure Caching or Branch Cache or third-party options. But they can work alongside with delivery optimization. But we do support fully updates with ConfigMgr and across all three ways that we would download it. So dynamic updates, again, all three. MDM agent updates. So whenever the agent gets updated on a system on Windows 11, then we support across all three. Now, Xbox Game Pass. So we do support Xbox Game Pass stuff, but notice we only support it for direct HTTP download, no peering, no Microsoft Connected Cache. Windows Package Manager, yes, for HTTP download, no peering, no Microsoft Connected Cache. And then MSIX files, same thing, direct download, no peering, no Microsoft Connected Cache. And then for Windows Server, it's only Windows Update and Edge browser updates. All three mechanisms are supported. For Linux, it's device updates for IoT Hub, and that's in preview, and only for HTTP download and Microsoft Connected Cache, right? So again, these are things you can look up yourself. I'm just putting them here for convenience, and so that you can have it in one place. All right. Now, other things, and we'll hit some of these real quick. So some key questions as you're thinking about configuring delivery optimization, understanding what your scenarios are so that we can figure out how best to support those scenarios. Like, does your topology include multiple ways to get to the internet, or is it all going through one thing? That will help you decide on things like download mode, how you want to configure that. Is everything behind one NAT, or do you need to figure out another way like using group ID or something like that? Are you using boundary groups in your topology with ConfigMgr? Because if you are, then ConfigMgr boundary groups can be translated into delivery optimization group IDs, and that's a convenience for you. Right? Certainly don't need to do that if you don't have boundary groups, like some organizations run ConfigMgr without boundary groups, then no big deal. You can still do what you need to with delivery optimization. Just ConfigMgr is not an option to help you shortcut that, right? And so, again, to be clear, you can do group IDs without boundary groups. It's just if you have ConfigMgr and you've established boundaries and you want to use those boundaries for establishing group IDs with delivery optimization, you can do that as a convenience, right? What percentage of your devices are mobile? Right? That's a very key thing just to understand, kind of the configuration, what you're going to do. One of the things that comes out of that I think about when I think about that scenario, what if, we just came out of COVID as I record this, what is your remote workforce scenario, right? You could configure things so that even remote workers at home are participating in delivery optimization, have a group ID, etc. You don't want to do that because there's absolutely no advantage to having these devices participate with each other in delivery optimization in terms of peer-to-peer, right? If you were to get these devices communicating with each other in a peer-to-peer fashion, then it would end up eating up more bandwidth and so on than just going directly to the internet whenever a user is working from home. There is an advantage to being able to use delivery optimization for some of the content security and some of the other controls that you have, right? So think about that. Do devices have lots of free disk space? If they do, maybe the group of devices with a lot of extra disk space, the caching limit, the disk space allocated to caching could be increased, right? Are there lab scenarios where you have devices on AC power, or where you have laptops that you need to control, when they participate in delivery optimization with battery percentages and so on, right? Just some things to ask and understand. There's also use cases. Again, these will mirror some of the things that we just talked about. If you have a hub and spoke topology, the download mode, again, 1 or 2, depending. Are they all behind the same NAT? That's download mode 1. Are they not, and you need to do something like a group ID? Great, that's download mode 2. You'll see that more in a minute. Do you have sites with more than 30 devices? Great. Then maybe the minimum file size to cache might be 10 megs, right? You can control kind of the size of the file that delivery optimization will cache for you, right? Now, ultimately, the delivery optimization service is responsible for that. So you might set, like I have in my lab, that the minimum file size to cache is 1 meg. I'm not necessarily going to cache all 1 meg files, depending on what the delivery optimization service wants to do, but I can allow for that. Large number of mobile devices, great. Are they going to allow uploads on battery power? The recommendation would be, the cutoff is 60%. Once they fall below 60%, they would not maybe want to participate in delivery optimization just to preserve battery life. If you have a lot of AC powered devices and you have, I think I flipped these in my discussion a minute ago, but if you have a lot of AC powered devices in a lab somewhere and those devices are on all the time on AC power, then maybe you want to keep the content in the cache of those devices longer. And so one of the things I'm hoping you're getting a flavor on through this, there's a lot of settings for delivery optimization. And with any setting, you might want to apply a certain set of settings differently for certain devices than others. So, for example, you might have a desire to put a different cache age on a certain group of lab devices, but still have them participate in the same group ID for download mode, right? That's totally fine. It's just a matter of how you configure your settings. And then there's other scenarios to think about in terms of your topology and so on. A number of these are duplicated and so on, right? Okay, so in terms of configuring, again, I'm not going to go through all of these. There are certain settings that are important, more probably front of mind than others, and we'll hit on some of those whenever we get into seeing this configured on devices, but I want to highlight them here. Now, I'll show you how my devices are configured next, right, coming up now. So I'm going to go show you how I have configured delivery optimization. Now, there are multiple ways that you can configure delivery optimization, right? There's 3. Certainly, you can do it manually. I'm going to show you where you have the settings through GPO. If you want to do it that way, really, GPO is not preference these days, because as we're thinking about getting modern, GPO is really something we want to get away from and use something like Intune or so on to help deliver those settings. So I'll then show you Intune, and then finally I'll show you some of the different things you can use, just a couple, to tweak in ConfigMgr to influence how delivery optimization is configured. Right now, in terms of configuring delivery optimization, you're really going to want to use GPO or Intune or an MDM to do that. ConfigMgr, you could use it to configure delivery optimization, I suppose. It's going to be more work to do that, and since GPO and Intune or MDM really built for that, they're the best paths to do it, right? Okay. As I get ready to dive into this too, I just, sometimes I guess people wonder, hey, there's this cool technology that Microsoft has. Does Microsoft actually use this themselves? And the answer is absolutely. In fact, if you look at delivery optimization documentation, you will find a section that talks about how we use delivery optimization to help in our own world, right? I could show you on my corporate desktop, not going to, but I could show you on my corporate desktop how delivery optimization is configured and so on. But I'm going to instead use lab machines. Okay, so I'm going to pull in my domain controller first, so I can talk to you about this with with GPO. Again, GPO, I'll show it to you where the settings are, but really would suggest that you use something other than GPO to turn this on, if at all possible. So under policies, right, then we're going to go down to administrative templates. And under administrative templates, we're going to have Windows components, and then delivery optimization will be under here. So delivery, where is it? Scroll over. Delivery, why am I not seeing it? Delivery, there it is, delivery optimization right here. Right, so all of these are GPO options that you can use to configure delivery optimization on your devices. The downside is GPO works with what? Domain joined devices. More and more and more, our devices are not domain joined. They may be pure Azure AD joined. They may be hybrid in some cases, probably a lot of cases still. They may be workgroup machines that are out there in your environment that are not part of your domain. And so if you put the configurations here, you'll have to find out some other way to get those configurations to the non-domain joined devices. Again, certainly you can put a script out there. Certainly you can do it manually, whatever. But having a platform that works regardless, whether it's domain joined, on-prem domain joined, whether it's Azure joined, whether it's whatever the case is, right, is a convenient thing. So here's where those settings are, but that's as far as I'm going to take it in terms of GPO, right? Okay, so what I want to show you, though, is how you can configure this through MDM, and in our case, Intune. So let me pull in my portal, right? Whenever the configurations were first introduced, you could always configure them through MDM, but it required using the custom configuration through OMA URI. Now, if we go into configuration profiles, the option is available right here. So we go to Windows Configuration Profiles, right? And so if I want to get to it, the easiest way is if I'm creating a new profile, select my platform, select templates, and we will see we have a delivery optimization template. That's what I've used here. So these are the lab settings that I've deployed. So let me explain the lab for a minute. I have 3 devices that are in my lab. And so in my lab, it's just here to show you how this works. Don't look at anything in my lab and think, oh, this is what it's going to look like in production, because likely it won't, right? But it's enough to show you how this is configured and how this works, right? So here are the settings that I've used for my lab, and you see that I've got 6 devices that have taken the settings for delivery optimization. Here are the settings that I'm using in my lab. Let's kind of talk through what some of these are. All right, so first, download mode. So we talked about download mode 1, 2 are the most common. We have these download modes, 0, which just HTTP, no peering at all. So we explain what it is. Download mode 1, this is where you're behind the same NAT, the same NAT. And so what's really important is to make sure that if you're going to use this download mode, make sure that your devices are getting the same public IP address. Really easy to do, right? You can go to, I think, what is it? What is my IP? I think this one. Yeah, what is myip.com, whatever. It'll show it to you there, and then I'm going to quickly leave because it does some pop-ups and such that I don't know what the pop-ups are, so I'd just soon not let them go forward. But that is something you can do to show you what the IP address is. And there's other ways, too, to make sure that you have the same internet, public internet-facing IP address, and then you could use download mode 1. For me, these VMs are on my laptop, and so generally speaking, that should be fine. But I do change Wi-Fi networks a lot, and there's some different experiences with the different Wi-Fi networks I'm on, and so it's kind of flaky if I do that. And so I chose to do download mode 2. This is where I have a group that these devices are all part of. So it really doesn't matter what the IPs are in different things. As long as we can get to the internet and we have the same group ID, then those are considered to be in the same group. And then we have just some other settings. Like here's simple download mode with no peering, and then there's a bypass. Now, as we move forward to Windows 11, I forget which one it is. Either I think it's 99 is deprecated. We don't use that anymore because it is a bit duplicative and such. But I don't recall. I could have those wrong. But that's what I've chosen to show this is 2. Right here, I can restrict peer selections by subnet mask if I want to. I have, again, I'm configuring with a group ID, so I need to get the group ID. There's ways that I can get it. You can get it from AD. You can get it these days from Azure AD too, as I recall. You can get it from DHCP, DNS suffix, whatever. You can do it custom. And in my case, I'm doing custom. So I have to go figure out how to get the group ID myself. Well, the good news is that's pretty easy. There's actually a PowerShell command that you can run in order to get the group ID on the device, right? I just paused the video. I wanted to pop up to show you how you can use PowerShell really, really easy. I popped up this tab, which links to our documentation, this URL, and it shows you to generate a GUID using PowerShell, just put this command in. Literally open up PowerShell and put this command in, and it will give you a GUID. That's what I did, and that's where I put in this particular GUID so that all 3 of my VMs are in the same group, right? Other things, bandwidth controls, so that you can optimize the foreground download percentage, background download percentage, and so on, right? Any kind of delays that you want to give in downloading through HTTP to give time for peering, for example, if it's available, and so on. Caching, how much or how you want to set the thresholds on which devices can participate in delivery optimization, in peering, right, in the caching part. So this one, one thing I can just tell you in general, read the directions. Don't do dumb things like I did, right, silly things like I did. So when I was first sitting at my lab, it wasn't working. Delivery optimization wasn't working. I'm like, what is going on? I know I've got it configured correctly, and I'll show you or point to a resource in a minute that's really helpful to go through some things. But I kept looking. I'm like, this is all right? Then I finally went through some things that we have documented to just say, okay, check these things. I'm like, well, I don't need to check them because I know they're right. But in fact, they weren't right? So for example, here I said minimum RAM required for peer caching. I have my VMs are all set to 2 gigabytes of RAM each, right? And so I wanted to say 1 gig of RAM each. Well, I didn't read this thing fully. I'm so used to seeing megabytes in there. I put 1024. Well, of course they're not going to participate. They don't have 1024 gigabytes of RAM. They have 2048 megabytes. And so I changed this down to 1. All of a sudden, hey, things came alive, right? There's some other things, too, that I found that were wrong as I went through, which I'll share in a minute, right? Minimum disk space or disk size required for peer caching, right? So whatever that would be for you, so that you don't have, small appliance-type devices that have tiny disk drives that are trying to participate in peer cache. That would be a challenging thing. The minimum content file size that you want to store in your cache, right? So that's in megabytes. So I just said 1 meg. That's pretty small. Those don't take long to download generally, and so it's really not probably cache efficient for you here. But I wanted to do that just in case. And again, that is controlled ultimately by the delivery optimization cloud service. So minimum battery life to participate in caching if you're not connected to AC power. So 60% is the recommended. If you want to modify your cache drive, this is where you do it. So by default, the cache is stored on the system drive. I'll show you where that is in just a minute, right? But you can change it if you have an extra drive on all your machines that you want, or on some machines where you want to shift the location just for extra storage space. You can do that. Here's another mistake that I made. Here, minimum cache age. So I was just running through the setup, and I don't recall if this was set. Let's see. Does it say the default here? Doesn't. I don't remember what the default was here. But however it was, I had this set to 0. So I had a weird scenario where it seemed like delivery optimization was working. I would see the content show up in the cache when it was downloading, and then within a few seconds after, the content was deleted. I'm like, what is going on? That's weird. And finally, I realized I had done a really, really silly thing, and I'd set the minimum cache age to 0. Well, of course, it's not going to stay in the cache when I set it to 0, so I changed it to 30 days, so we'll keep the content in the cache longer. Maximum cache size you can set as a total percentage. I'm letting it use a ton of space on my drives because that's really all I'm using it for right now, and so on. Now, here is where if you are using a Microsoft connected cache server, you can put in that detail and so on. And that's really how I have mine configured, right? So this is through MDM. So, and all of that is deployed and available on my device, and we'll see the settings in a minute when we get to the device. Okay, so let's see on the config manager side. Now again, config manager, so Intune, what we just saw, MDM, you can easily configure these settings. It's designed for that. Config manager, there's nothing in it to say, use delivery optimization, check, and then we configure everything on it for you, right? We can configure some things if you choose to participate in delivery optimization. Like, let me just pull config manager in and show you, right? So here's config manager. If I go down to client settings, then I do have a delivery optimization node in client settings. And so this is saying, hey, use delivery optimization boundary groups for delivery optimization group ID. Yes or no? So if you have boundary groups configured and you like the way that they're grouping your network, right, then it might be a natural thing to just, since the boundary groups are, hey, a group of clients already that are in a location similarly, right, then using that as a group ID might make sense. Now, if you have 10 boundary groups and you say use these all for group ID, then you'll end up having 10 group IDs, right? All to make, and that's great. That's what you might want. So this is truly a convenience for sure if you have that kind of thing set. Now, if you don't have boundary groups in use in Config Manager, that's fine, right? Some organizations don't. You can still use delivery optimization. You'll just need to go figure out a way to configure that yourself. And then the second option is really if you want to allow Config Manager devices to use the Microsoft Connected Cache and so on, right? So that's really it for Config Manager. You could, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could go set these things with configuration items, scripts. There are ways to do it through Config Manager, but it's not an obvious way through the console that you can just go click a few buttons and set things up, right? Oh, and also, I already closed client settings, but you'd want to make sure under the software updates, if you're going to use delivery optimization to allow clients to download data or Delta content when available, set that to yes. That's the setting under the software updates node, and so forth, that you would want to turn on to allow your clients to even use delivery optimization if you want to through Configuration Manager. Okay, so that's a few options for configuring delivery optimization in your organization. Let me get Config Manager Site Server out of the way here. Okay. All right. Just looking to make sure that I didn't have anything else I wanted to talk about. Okay, good enough, right? Now, let's go see this thing in action, right? So the first thing I want to do is kind of take you on a tour of my clients. So I mentioned I have 3 clients. I'm going to show you 2 of them. Whenever I started my delivery optimization, go ahead. Whenever I started working on delivery optimization in my lab, I built 3 machines. One of the machines, the one that I'm on now, is the one that I started all of my test downloads from, right? In other words, this is the machine that when I downloaded something, I knew it wasn't on any other peer, and I wanted to just have this be the lead machine so that it would have to do the full download from the internet, right? And so on this one, I initially didn't have any kind of peering. In other words, I didn't recognize any other peer or anything else. Right? It all just downloaded direct from the internet. Now, since then, things have changed a bit, and you'll see some other things have actually come into play here and so on. But initially, this is what I downloaded everything to. Right? In our documentation, remember, you're looking through some troubleshooting to make sure delivery optimization is working. One of the things that suggests that you try is to download a Windows Store app. And the one it suggests is Candy Crush Saga. Just because of the size, it will definitely qualify for delivery optimization. So I did that. Right. Another thing I did, which I'm not going to show you that one because again, it doesn't matter. I just needed to get something into the cache. Another one, and here's Candy Crush Saga, so you see it's downloaded. I did some other things here too. Again, it doesn't really matter what content type I chose, whether it's store or updates or Win32 apps, doesn't matter. What matters is that I have something in the cache that I can then work with and share across to my peers. So this is the machine where I downloaded that first. Since then, there's been some other things downloaded, right? Okay, so we talked about configuring options in Intune, right, through MDM. And so when you do that, there's a registry section where those settings are shown, and it's right here, right? So local machine, software, Microsoft Policy Manager, current. Current is really important. You see a current section here, and you see default. Default settings are, hey, big mystery, the default settings that are in place for a given configuration. So if you look under default, yeah, you'll see a section for delivery optimization, but those are not the settings in place on this machine right now. The ones that are in place on this machine right now are under current, right? And then it's a device level setting, so that's why it's under devices, and here's delivery optimization. And so a few key things to point out. Download mode. I had set mine to download mode 2. It is set to download mode 2. I've also provided a group ID, which is a GUID. Here is the GUID. Right? There's some other things in terms of max cache age that initially I saw this was 0, so I had to wait for this to be a non-zero number. It is now. And some different settings. So you can confirm the settings here. So it's possible, I suppose, that you could have something that applies your settings to a number of devices, but maybe one has problems or two have problems. So you can always go configure or confirm that the configurations are in place by looking in the registry. And also note that when you're dealing with settings that are applied through MDM, that is this section of the registry, right, under Policy Manager. If you're looking at things, if you're setting things through GPO, that is not this section of the registry. That is another section of the registry. So be sure, depending on how you're configuring things, that you're looking in the right location to find out if things are configured correctly, right? Okay, so let's get rid of this. Now, another thing that I wanted to know is, okay, I've got delivery optimization configured. I've got some content downloaded. Where is the delivery optimization cache? So by default, it's going to be in this path. So service profiles, network service, and then app data, local, Microsoft, Windows. We put it down there pretty deep. Delivery optimization, right? So there's a few things here. We do have logs. I'm not going to show you the logs, except for here. I'll use something to get data into from the logs in a minute. These are ETL files, so you can't read the ETL files directly, but there is a PowerShell command that will let you convert these and work with these files in a way that you want to. We document how to do that. I'll show you one simple example in a minute, right? Then there's some state. Now, we also talk about log 1, log 2. So these aren't really log files. I think of these, I could be wrong. I haven't really dug into the state files, but I think of the log files kind of like, maybe WSUS would be. There's kind of a database in there that keeps track of things. That's kind of the way I would think about these, just based on the name and the structure here. And then here we have cache. So this is where all of my files that have come down from delivery optimization are stored, right? Now, when I first did this, I just did this with Candy Crush. Since then, just playing with the machine, other things have shown up in the cache. And so I have a number of files in the cache. I can come in and look, and I'm really not going to have to give permission. I'm really not going to see what these files are. It's the names aren't really descriptive of what it is, meaning if I have an MSI or a Win32 app or something that I'm deploying here, the names are not what I would initially have, right? But you can see the content size and different things. You can see the cache right here. Now, here's another thing that was a misunderstanding by me when I first started with this, right? How would we go about diagnosing, if in fact delivery optimization is working, right? And so we document that there's a couple of PowerShell commands that are very useful, and they are, but it helps to understand what the expectation is. And my expectation was not accurate at first. So let me just show you the PowerShell commands first, right? So I'm going to run Windows PowerShell as an administrator. And then as soon as it comes up in the background somewhere, there it goes, right? So I'm going to run two commands. First is, man, that's taking a minute to come up. There we go. Get delivery optimization. Did I spell that right? Delivery optimization status. So I looked at this command. I thought, well, this is going to tell me if delivery optimization is enabled and how it's working and so forth. And yeah, it does, right? But what it's going to look at, this command is going to look at the content that's stored in the delivery optimization cache. So I told you, whenever I was first trying to set this up, I had the delivery optimization max cache age set to 0, and I would see a folder get created and the content get created in the folder. And while that folder was there, this PowerShell command worked, because it's really it's going to show you the status of the content that's in the cache. When the content was deleted from the cache because of the max cache age being 0, I run this command again. It comes up blank because there's nothing in the cache, right? And now I have, 8 objects, 8 folders in the cache. And so what I'm going to expect is that when I run this command, it's going to give me a result, 8 results. And in fact, it has, right? So here's result 1, there's a space, and then there's result 2, there's a space, then there's result 3, there's a space, and I can keep going up and whatever. But what I care about is looking at each individual content type. I can look at the file ID, right? And I don't think, I was going to say, no, does it match here? It doesn't. But it'll tell me, for example, the file size in the cache, the status, whether it's complete, the background priority, blah, blah, blah. Other things, download mode, so it's group mode because I'm using group ID. Here's a key thing: number of peers for this content, 2. This is one of the devices that has the content, and then I have 2 other VMs that can potentially use this content on my network. 2 other delivery optimization enabled VMs. Remember, my lab has 3 total delivery optimization enabled VMs. And so this gives me the detail on being able to use, who can be able to use that. So if this is 0, then either you've just started playing with this content or getting this content into your cache, or delivery optimization is not recognizing any other peer that can possibly use this content. So it's a good way to recognize whether things are set up and possibly workable, right? Okay, so number of peers. I'm just looking for one that has number of peers 0. I don't think I'll find it. Here, number of peers 0. So this one hasn't, there's no need for it, or no one else has asked for it, or whatever else, right? Number of peers. Anyway, so I won't go through all of them, but you get the idea. Now, another really useful PowerShell command is to get the performance numbers across all of delivery optimizations. Perf snap, so performance snapshot, right? So this will tell you right away number of files downloaded, 8, because you see 8 files in the cache, or folders in the cache, if you will. total number of files, total bytes downloaded, total bytes uploaded to other peers on the network, the average download size, upload size, what download mode we're in, and just other good stats that are out there. And again, you'll see a number of peers somewhere in here as well. I thought, let's see, yeah, number of peers, seven peers, right, that are in here. Anyway, so these are really cool ways to at least see that delivery optimization is working, and a good way to go about it. Now, another one that I like is visual, right? We can read all of that, we can make sense of all that, but if you want to show the results of delivery optimization to someone maybe in leadership that certainly they can follow the numbers, but it's cool to be able to show a picture, right? And so you can go to Activity Monitor, and we will give you a visual reflection of what you just saw through PowerShell here, right? Now, so this one is, again, my lead machine. And so I don't expect that it's going to get content from any other peers. It's going to be the first one to get it, so it's going to download everything. And that, in fact, is what you see reflected here. But then you see upload to other PCs on the network. There's other peers out there that need this content. And so this one, now that it has it, can share that content with other computers on the network, right? So this is my lead device. And so I wanted to show you that. Now, I have another device out here that is a peer that got some of the content from my lead device. So let's take a look at it, right? And really all I'm going to show you on this device is Activity Monitor. All of the other stuff will work as well, but this is just to show you real quick. This one has received content from the first machine, right? So 89% came from Microsoft, 10% came from devices on my local network, and then here's the stat. So it's not really uploading to anyone else. Now, again, folks, this is my lab. Don't look at these numbers and think, oh, this is what it's going to look like in production. I'm only going to get 10% from my peers. Well, no, this is my lab. It's 3 machines. It's very artificial, right? Try this out yourself. You will see the impact is going to be quite beneficial, right? Okay, so that's really it for the demo. There's one more thing I want to show you that I'll need a device for, but let's shift over to troubleshooting tips and tricks first. We'll come back to the device in just a second. I want to show you something about the logs. But I mentioned that when I was setting up my own lab, that there were some problems that I ran into, and I found our documentation to be very, very useful in helping troubleshoot through my issues, right? So you can find it on the web just looking up, delivery optimization, and you'll get to our troubleshooting docs. But basically, there's some scenarios in there that basically says, hey, if you're having trouble because there's no bytes, no data coming from peers, go look at a few things and check and double check, make sure things are good, right? Or maybe, clients aren't able to reach the delivery optimization cloud service. Go try a few different things, right? And found those to be very useful. Or maybe the cloud service doesn't see that you have any other peers on the network, and it tells you what to go do to validate that, and so forth. And then the last one is, hey, clients aren't able to connect to peers on the same network that are even being offered. And this one was one I stared at about 5 times and thought, nah, this is all good, right? So I have 3 devices in my set of VMs that are using delivery optimization. And I could ping back and forth. I'd killed the firewalls on them, so there was nothing that was preventing them from getting to one another. I could connect file shares. I could do all that. And I'm like, well, these are working fine. Why is delivery optimization not working? Well, the answer was that even though I could get to them back and forth, it seemed like they were fine. The documentation here says, no, try to telnet from one to another. And so on 2 of the 3, I could telnet back and forth just fine. On the 3rd, I could not get to that one to save my life from any of the VMs, even the VM itself. While I was on the machine, I could not telnet to myself. So something was weird with that. Turned out to be a networking thing that I fixed, but that definitely raised to me what to look for and what the issue was in terms of not being able to get a telnet session established. So very, very good stuff. Validate your delivery optimization settings. Make sure that you don't make the same mistake I did and set your RAM to 1024 gigabytes whenever you really intend to set it to 1 gigabyte and so forth, right? Okay, so logs. So delivery optimization has, I've already shown you some really good ways that you can get in and look at what's going on with the PowerShell commands, get your status, get your performance snapshot, see what's going on with Activity Monitor. But when things aren't going right, you might need to look into logs and see what's going on. And so you can do that. So these logs are ETL format, right? So you're going to want maybe as you're troubleshooting through to convert them into a format you can read. So I'm just going to run a PowerShell command to quickly do that. Give me a minute, and I'm going to pause the video and type in the PowerShell command. Stand by. Okay, so I've done that. So you see, basically what I'm doing is taking the get delivery optimization log command, and that command knows where the delivery optimization logs are, and storing that, the contents of all that, into a variable. Then I'm taking the variable, and initially I did it wrong. I forgot to put out file. Taking that variable and piping it out to a text file on the root of my C drive. And so now that I've done that, I have a text formatted set of logs that I can, or logs converted to text, that I can then go look at. And here, so that's an old one I did. So basically, you're going to see details about what's going on. Now, I'm not going to sift through this line by line and show it, but there's a lot of good detail in here about what's happening, different areas that we're looking at for configuration and so on, errors that might be happening, response, blah, 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 right? So we do have some good logging that will help you understand. And again, that's just one way to get it converted. If you want to hone in on things, our documentation tells you some suggestions about doing that. I've shown you how to get to the cache folder, and I've also mentioned to you there's the state folder, right? Now, in terms of a few tips and tricks on this, so I've shared with you already the peering operation. So when Windows devices, workstations that are enabled for delivery optimization only will peer with workstations. Servers that are enabled for delivery optimization only will peer with servers, right? And then on workstations, delivery optimization is enabled by default. On servers, it is disabled by default. So that's one thing to understand. So in terms of other things, remote workers mentioned that if you have a user that is working from home or the equivalent of home, there is absolutely no advantage of peering using delivery optimization. That does not mean, though, there's not advantage of delivery optimization. There is, right? The content security we have and other controls, custom device groups. So you can have your group ID combined with group download mode to set up your custom device group, no problem. Using one of those things, identifiers, again, ConfigMgr can help you have your custom device group. You can have 80 sites. You can have delivered with DHCP. You can do your own custom like I did. It's not that hard, and it can absolutely be beneficial to you to be able to do this, right? In terms of disk space and caching, be aware of those devices. Use something like ConfigMgr Inventory, or Intune Inventory, or whatever, maybe compliance or configuration items, whatever, to go find those devices in your environment that would be good devices to participate in caching. And then those devices can be targeted maybe for higher cache or disk space, cache size or whatever, right? So factor those in. You can also move your cache if you want to on devices that have more than one hard drive, and then also you can define what your cache file size is. Now, you don't have to do that. The DO service will handle that for you, but if you want to try to tweak what the DO service will deliver to you, then you can. And then if you're working with M365 apps, notice that you need to be on at least version 1912, which should be no problem these days, of your M365 apps. and so forth, right? So, and more details there just to be aware of. So, folks, with that, that is the discussion of delivery optimization that I've wanted to have for a while. Now we've had it, and we will wrap the session here. Again, may do a Microsoft Connected Cache session on this as well. I haven't decided yet. We'll see. But at least we've gotten through delivery optimization, and it's really cool. I'm actually glad I waited to do this discussion because of some tweaks that have come in as the product has been further developed. So regardless of your caching scenario, definitely take a look at this. I think it will be beneficial to you, and at the very least, it's good to know about. So we'll put a bookmark right there, and we will see you next time.